I see, here I go. I'm clapping again. Welcome back to my channel. Wendy Renee here. So excited to have you. Wait until you meet my new friend, Jennifer. Before we begin, I want to thank you so much for liking, sharing, subscribing, and doing all the things with our videos. With every subscriber, it just shows that there's hope and positivity and wellness and health on the other side of high control religion and narcissistic abuse. Be sure to check out our TikTok where we have some interesting conversations in the comment section, and also on Instagram where I tend to overshare. Jennifer and her family just recently disassociated, and we're going to talk about how all of that came to fruition. And just remember, we find ourselves in these stories. Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're so excited to have you here. Why don't you introduce yourself and give us a little bit of backstory?
I am so excited to be here. I found you on TikTok pretty quick after I woke up, and then your YouTube. And so it's really exciting to get to talk to you, and hopefully sharing my story helps somebody else the way so many stories have helped me this year. So I'm just hoping that I can pay that forward a little bit.
Well, you are big time, let me tell you. So were you born and raised a JW? Do you have generational relationships in the organization?
My mom was studying when she was pregnant with me at my dad's request, but then he didn't actually start studying until I was 3 or 4, and she'd already been baptized, and then he finally started studying. And so there was a very brief time when I was an infant that we weren't witnesses, but I don't remember any of it. So my dad's whole side is pretty much in, or at least POMI. Even if they're not actually in, they believe it. I was baptized 13, so young. I look back at the time, I thought I was mature and I knew everything.
Very 13 of us, right?
Exactly. But then I think back and I think I didn't even know that baptism wasn't the whole thing. I remember a year or two after I got baptized, for the first time hearing, or it dawning on me, that you're supposed to, have this dedication prayer, and that the baptism was just an outward expression. I never knew that. I think about my kids, and I think at 13, there's no way they have the ability. I mean, we wouldn't let them get married at 13, but we're going to let them make a commitment lifelong, with lifelong consequences.
I never made that connection, because I know when we were growing up, they had articles talking about baptism and how they mentioned how it's just like marriage and how serious of a decision it is. And I never put it together that, oh, I'm too young to get married, but I'm not too young to get baptized and dedicate myself to an invisible creator-ish. Okay.
Because they give us no critical thinking skills at all. They take that away from you. So if they don't make a connection for you, that connection doesn't get made,
There is no coming to your own conclusions at all. Yeah,
absolutely. There's no identity or way of thinking that isn't force fed to you. When I have 2 older sisters. My oldest, they're half sisters, so we have different moms. So they were able to leave and go away every, it was shared custody. So they weren't always 100% constantly indoctrinated. So my oldest sister never got baptized. If there's a bad decision out there, she's made it. And she struggles with addiction and a lot she struggles with. But the middle sister, so older than me, but not the oldest, did get baptized. And in fact, I think she got baptized and disfellowshipped within the same year. So at 15, she was disfellowshipped. I was 12. And I think it was immediate. Like, I can't remember times very well, but it seems like within a day or two of, her secret life, her double life coming out, that she was kicked out and moved in with her mom. And so at 15, she was my best friend. She was my hero. She was my, who I looked up to. She was my person. And then she was just taken away. And so then it was like, I had all this pressure on me that I was the last kid left. I, had to be the perfect kid. I had, people talk about the youngest child being the one that gets away with everything and it was not like that. By the time I came along, there were so many rules and so much pressure, and I had absolutely no freedom of anything. And
so it's like watching her go through that. It sounds like it psychologically said something to you, like you better be on your best behavior.
Yeah, right? Because she at least had a mom to go to. If I did something, if I messed up and got kicked out, I had nowhere to go. You know, my mom and dad were both in it. And then you
Mhm.
add to this that my dad is a classic narcissist. I mean, not just the tendencies. No, he absolutely narcissistic personality disorder. I wasn't physically abused the way a lot of kids do. I mean, got spankings up until I was 13 or 14 years old. But I mean, in every other imaginable way, I was abused. And so she was, you know, my safe place. It was, you know, her and I against everything. And then she disappeared and I had the full wrath of everybody. And so after she left, then I was in 7th grade. And over the summer of 7th grade, they decided they were pulling me out of public school because, you know, insulate, insulate, insulate. And so my small world shrunk even smaller.
A
Both of my
great word for it. I've never heard it put that way. Beautiful way. Insulated. Never thought of that. That's exactly what it is too.
Yeah, I mean, you're
Yeah.
just put in this bubble and they control,
Yeah.
and by they, I mean both the organization and my parents
Mhm.
controlled
Right.
everything. And so I spent a lot of time out in service because my parents both worked. I was home alone all the time, and it was a way to get out of the house. And
Mhm.
so I spent a lot of time out in service and, you know, making what I thought, I guess, were meaningful connections or close friends. But until years later, when I got married and I had kids, I never, ever had experienced unconditional love. And once I started experiencing what unconditional love was, it really showed me that everything that I'd had up to that point, like just the difference was insane.
You realize it in hindsight that you didn't have it.
Exactly.
Because you
I
think
mean,
that dysfunction is normal.
yeah, and you know, and that dysfunction and thinking it was normal. I mean, up until this year, I've only been out since January, and I'll get to that.
Wow.
So coming up on a year. But just being away, not just from the constant indoctrination from the religion, but the constant indoctrination from him, I've been able to really pick apart and assess and the things that I grew up with, the things that I always thought were normal, and realizing that they weren't normal and they weren't okay. And some of that even amounts to, my oldest daughter and I are both in therapy, and things that she would tell that my dad would say or do to her, and the therapist's mouth would just drop open. It's really been, I think that's been the hardest thing to go through, isn't leaving the religion. It isn't waking up from all that indoctrination. It's really acknowledging what he put us through.
The inner child wounds.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I
Mm.
have been saying, I feel like it's my motto anymore is that that organization 100% breeds and attracts abusers and
Oh, yeah.
narcissists and victims. It attracts narcissists and breeds victims. Maybe that's the better way to say it, because you're not taught that you're worth fighting for. You're not taught that you're worth love or that you're worth anything better than what you get.
It's
You just,
interesting. It kind of attracts a melting pot of empaths and narcissists as well. You know, and empaths, I'm one, and I seem to really be able to pick up on narcissistic abuse now that I had been really doing research on it. The organization as a whole, objectively, as if you look at the organization as a person, is
is
an
incredibly
actual
narcissistic.
narcissistic relationship. And recovering from that, I mean, I'm so glad people are talking about this more and more frequently, how hard it is to recover from a narcissistic relationship. It's not an actual person, but it's the same exact thing. You
It's,
have the
yeah,
gaslighting and the triangulation and the flying monkeys, three
exactly.
elders for a committee. That's
Yeah.
triangulation, you know?
Yes. No,
So
I've thought the same thing. There's been so many parallels. It's insane that you don't see it when you're in it. So after she left, it was all this pressure on me, all of my dad's energy and wrath and everything was, it was just me. I had nobody to split it with. I have more difficult feelings about my mom than my dad because I love her, and for so long when I felt like I had to pick sides, I picked her side. But now that there's been time away and I can look back, she's very codependent. She was abused as a child, married an abusive man. Abusers know how to pick a victim, and he picked a victim, and she has played that part well. For they are coming up on 40 years. March they'll be married 40 years, and she's had many times that were scripturally approved to divorce him, and she didn't. And then there's been times that she's left or they've separated, and then she lets guilt from the religion push her back in because of those times she didn't have scriptural grounds. And I struggle with my feelings for her because she didn't protect me. Like, he did all these things, but she let it happen. And so these are all the things that I was dealing with as a, as a 13-year-old who's already going through puberty, already hormonal, already has all the, adolescent angst. And then on top of that, my sister leaving and the pressure to be perfect and, the family dynamic. And I was a mess.
It's
Yeah.
religion and narcissism. There's a
Well,
very, very close link.
it's a perfect hiding place for abusers.
Right.
It's a perfect hiding place for abusers. I didn't have a lot of friends. My sister was the pretty one and the popular one, and I was not. And so when she left, it was, I always felt the third wheel. Now, I will say that, and I kind of want to throw this in there because it'll come back later, is when I was real little, I had 3 best friends. There was always this connection between me and these 2 other, one girl and one boy. So remember them for later on in my story. But other than that, I just never really had a ton of close friends. And then when I was 16, we moved congregations. So this is the thing about my dad is we moved congregations a lot. By the time I was 16, we had been to, I think, 5 congregations because he wouldn't get along with the brothers on the body, or he wasn't getting, moved up
It was
through the
always
ranks
somebody
fast
else's
enough.
problem, right? Somebody else was
Always,
to blame for the
always.
congregation hopping. Yes. What is
Yes.
that about?
I don't know. But you know what's amazing is one of his favorite sayings all of my life has always been, if you have a problem with this person and this person and this person, what's the common denominator?
You. Oh my God. Did we have the same family?
I think we must have. No,
Oh
I'm
my
serious.
God.
Like your TikToks. I'm like, oh my goodness, yes, that's me. So we moved congregations a lot. And so right about the time I was 16, we moved to a new congregation where they didn't know my sister, where I wasn't, it was still in the same circuit, but it was a different part of the circuit. So nobody knew me. There were no preconceived notions. And I made a couple of close friends, graduated high school. I went to, started pioneering because that's what you did right out of high school. No questions asked. We were there for a couple of years. I met my husband. To this day, I don't know how my parents allowed this because I was so restricted from doing anything. And I was at this point 18, just turned 19, but still I had no freedom. I didn't get to go any place without asking or, without permission. But my parents went on vacation I think it was for an anniversary, and let me stay home alone, which was shocking. And then even more shocking is that the group of kids in our hall, and these were all very good association kids, like pioneers doing what they're supposed to. Nobody, had gotten in trouble. There was they were the good kids, good association. There's this, big group of teenagers from across, I think, 3 or 4 different states getting together to go on a ski trip. And for some reason, some miracle, I was allowed to go. First time I was ever able to do anything like that. And I met my husband, and I am sure that to this day, my father regrets mightily that he let me go. I will be forever thankful that I got to go because I met my husband, and they say that girls raised by narcissistic fathers often marry narcissistic men. I got very, very lucky. I was young. We were 19 when we met, and we have grown up together. And so often, so many marriages of people my age in the organization who got married the same time I did, there's very few of us left still married. And he is as far from my father as you can possibly get. We got married very fast. We met in January. We were married by October. And even then, that wasn't fast enough. Being a 19-year-old kid, we engaged in premarital sex.
No.
Oh, I know. It's
You do what normal people do.
Horrible. How dare
I knew that was coming. The way that you tell it, you're telling it like you're waiting to drop some atomic bomb on the conversation.
I know. Well, because as a witness, my goodness, it is.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And so we came forward very quickly after we got married. We were privately reproved. And the thing is, I tried so hard to be a good witness. My whole life, I tried so hard to be a good witness, and I just never was. No matter how hard I tried, I was never once I got married and moved out, we were never super consistent with meeting attendance, never super consistent with field service or studying. And I tried so desperately hard to be good at those things. And so I feel like I never had a chance to feel like I had Jehovah's approval ever. So it started out when I was young because my sister was living this double life and I knew everything that she was doing. She would tell me things she was doing. So I knew she'd have boys in the house. I knew she'd smoke, and I didn't tell anybody because she was my idol. I loved her. And so from the time that she got disfellowshipped and moved out, like I lived with this guilt that because I'd hidden her sins, I wasn't going to make it into the paradise.
You're a
And
sharer
then,
in her work, right?
yes,
Oh,
yes.
I'm so sorry. Mm.
It is what it is.
Wow.
I try really hard not to live with regrets because everything that I've gone through is led me to this place in my life where I am right now, and I have never been
Well, yeah,
happy.
that's made up
So
anyway. It's a made up rule. So
it
yeah.
really is. It's just the fear that you're raised with from very,
Mhm.
and they're really good at putting a spin on it and making it seem as though they're just giving you good news and these amazing hopes, but it's this constant fear mongering.
Or a spin
And
on your
so
marriage since you guys engaged in like normal stuff.
exactly.
I was just talking to someone about this last night. They said, even if couples in the organization engage in premarital sex, so many articles came out about how the couple lose respect for each other
Yeah.
and you're kind of doomed anyway, even if you go forward. They make it sound like the relationship is completely lost.
And it absolutely blows my mind
Yeah.
that that's, we're taught that from the very beginning. And so you
Mhm.
have no other frame of reference. So
Mhm.
here I am, I'm almost 40 years old now. I have
Mhm.
only ever slept with my husband. He has only
Mhm.
ever slept with me. To
Mhm.
anybody in the world, that is like rare and, special. But as a witness, because we didn't wait till marriage, it was tainted. And it takes away the purity and the love and the
Yeah.
specialness of it
Well, yeah,
because you're so dirty.
you would lose respect for him as a spiritual head, and he would lose respect for you as a woman. It's purity culture. It's just
Exactly.
extremely toxic.
Exactly. Yes. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
Mhm.
Yes. And so it went from feeling like I wasn't going to make it into the paradise anyway because I knew about my sister, and then because we engaged in premarital sex, and then because no matter how hard I tried, we couldn't be regular at meetings. We couldn't be out in service. For years, Wendy, years, I am not even exaggerating, I would have trouble studying. Like I'd sit down to study for the meeting or personal study or Bible reading, whatever it was, and could not get my brain to focus. I'd read a paragraph and not have any clue what I just read. And it was ingrained in me that was because there was a flaw in me. I didn't have enough faith. I didn't love Jehovah enough, or Jehovah saw something in me that he didn't want. And so he wasn't making it clear for me.
It's interesting what you said, that you weren't a good enough witness. But did you question that whether or not you were a good person?
Never, not
Isn't
once.
that
Because
interesting? You
it's
wrap
your
your
whole
identity.
identity. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
exactly.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. I can't tell you the number of prayers and tears where I'd be begging, like if you don't want me in your organization, let me know. Just, find a way. If you want me here, you're going to have to help me because I'm hanging on by my fingernails and I can't do this on my own. There's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with my faith, but I'm trying. If you love me, Jehovah, if you want me, you've got to do this for me. You got to give me something so that I know whether I'm wanted or not. And after years and years of feeling like I'm not getting an answer and I'm still struggling, I truly believed, the scripture where it talks about Jehovah draws those whom he wants. So I figured, well, it works the other way too. And if he doesn't want you, he's going to push you out. And so I struggled with this feeling like I wasn't good enough for Jehovah to want me. He was pushing me out because I couldn't concentrate on my studies. I didn't enjoy the meetings, couldn't pay attention. I couldn't, whatever it was that I was struggling with, it was because Jehovah didn't want me. By this time, when there would be so many times that, I'd tell my husband, hey, this is a very crude expression, but I'd say, we need to shit or get off the pot. Like
Girl,
either
you're preaching to the choir with crude. I can be very crass. So make it up for lost time, okay?
I know I have always struggled with a potty mouth and I love that
I'm
now I
good.
can just let it go.
Okay, we're best friends now. It's fine.
I'm good with that. So
Yeah, because there is no. I remember a phrase that they use in the organization all the time, but you're never going to see a non-practicing Jehovah's Witness. It really is in or out, which again, the black and white
yeah,
thinking of
the fence
narcissism.
belongs to Satan.
Right? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I would tell him like, okay, we either need to get serious and
Hmm.
get regular at the meetings, get out in service, or we need to get out. Why are we fighting this? But then, my oldest daughter had come along, and then my second daughter. And so it was like, I know I'm not going to make it into the paradise. I've just resigned to the fact I'm going to die in Armageddon, but I've got to get my kids in. Like, I cannot let my girls die in Armageddon because there's something wrong with me. And so then, my oldest daughter is 17. So 16 years, I pushed through being miserable and feeling like, even though I knew it was the truth, 100% knew it was the truth, I just wasn't good enough. There was something wrong with me, but I got to push through for her. And then I've got to push through for them. So at least they can make it.
Because you're responsible for their faith. You're responsible
Yeah.
for their life and death.
Yeah.
It's interesting how, looking back, so the husband is responsible for the whole family making it into the new system, and it's like you're responsible for the sins of each other, and it just doesn't make any
No.
sense
And
at
I
all.
always, that's one of those things, again, that I always just chalked up to something wrong with me, that I just didn't have enough faith, because it never made sense to me that the children would make it or not make it based on their parent. So you can have a kid that's got a perfectly pure heart, or, Jehovah
Mhm.
sees the heart condition, but if their parents rejected him, sorry, kid, you're out. Like, it just
Mhm.
never made sense. But I still
Mhm.
never questioned it.
Me
I
neither.
still believed it enough that I stuck around for 17 years feeling terrible about myself the whole time, just to give my kids a chance of making it in. And I was watching another interview you did with somebody, I can't remember who, and you made the comment about, like, I never had suicidal thoughts. That's one thing I'm thankful for. Even no matter the depression, the anxiety that I went through, I never dealt with suicidal thoughts. However, the number of times that I had the thought that, if I died in this system, at least I'd have a chance. At least I'd have a chance to be resurrected, and it just, that's not okay. It's not okay. It's not okay what they do to our mental health. And that's what it comes down to. And so I'm trying not to make a really long story out of something that shouldn't be, but, so these are all the
There is
things
no
like.
shoulds or shouldnts on this channel. Not at all.
I
We're going to do
appreciate
away with the shoulds. But being a mom, when you're struggling, here's the challenge about being a mom when you're in this organization. When you are reparenting yourself while raising children and being a parent to other human beings, that is probably one of the hardest things to overcome, is healing the father of healing the mother wound, healing the inner child, and raising children. And you
Yeah.
especially, I mean, I am more on the fortunate side because my kids 7 and 8, we bounced, so I had a little bit easier time unraveling indoctrination. But you now had teenager, so I can't imagine what this must be like for you. I'm sure you're going to get to talk about how you unravel this and what that was like, because there are parents
Yeah.
in the organization whose teenage children are shunning them now.
And I was raised, of course, by a narcissistic father who always told me I wasn't good enough, always made sure I knew that I was overweight. And the number of times I was called lazy, and like, I'm an intelligent person. I was in accelerated classes in school. I learned to read early. All of the things, but I never applied myself hard enough. And for being so smart, why am I acting so stupid? And this was my inner voice. This was what I was told growing up. This was my inner voice for all these years. So I went through this phase, I want to say, for probably the last close to 10 years before we woke up. I truly thought that there was something medically wrong with me. I went to doctors and rheumatologist, and I don't can even tell you the list of tests and blood work, because I had all these physical symptoms, exhaustion and pain, and was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, was diagnosed with.
Fibromyalgia. So was I. Yeah. So you're getting to the body keeps the score, aren't you?
Oh my
Yes,
goodness, chronic.
yes, you
Yeah,
are.
chronic
Hmm.
fatigue. There was a stretch of maybe 3 or 4 years where it was a struggle to get out of bed. And at this point, my youngest there's 7 years between my kids. So I have a 17-year-old and a 10-year-old. And so my now 10-year-old at the time was too little. She wasn't self-sufficient. So I had to be able to get up to take care of her needs. But it took superhuman strength just to get out of bed. And all of this time thinking that there was a physical medical condition, and through all of this, through the pain and I was angry all the time. And I hated being an angry person. And there was this time my youngest daughter was 4, and she did something, I don't remember what it was, whatever toddlers do, whatever preschoolers do. And I started screaming at her. I mean, screaming. And she did not flinch. It did not, like, she didn't bat an eye at it. And I broke. Like, I was, I sent her in the other room. I remember we were in the bathroom and I told her, just go to your room and play. And I sat down on the bathroom floor and I'm trying not to start crying. I sobbed because what is wrong with me that I scream so much that my 4-year-old doesn't even flinch at being screamed at in the face by her mom. And
This is
so,
reactive abuse. This is what reactive abuse looks like.
and
Mhm.
and at this point, I didn't know anything about generational trauma. I didn't know about, I didn't know my father was a narcissist. I didn't know anything. And so, like, literally that day, I made a phone call to the doctor and I was like, I need to talk to somebody. I need to get in. I need to do something because I'm losing my mind. And so she put me on an antidepressant, which whole other story, but my father is very anti-pharmaceutical, like a lot of witnesses. So it was like this big secret in the family that I couldn't tell him that I was on an antidepressant because the way he judges it and felt about it. And so it was like having to keep this major part of my mental health journey a secret because I didn't want to be judged. I didn't want to be lectured. I didn't want to be talked down to. And I started therapy. And that was the best thing that could have ever happened for me. I think it really started laying the foundation 6 years ago for me to finally leave this last year. And that's when I discovered what these struggles were, what anxiety looked like, what panic attacks looked like. I've been having panic attacks for years and had no clue that that's what it was. Finally, kind of being able to start healing, finally starting to be able to break those cycles. And that became the most important thing in my life, was to break the cycles of abuse, that I was not going to raise my kids to have the same issues that I did. And that, my husband
Yeah,
and
it's
I,
like you're in my brain. You are in this. We have the exact same story. I wonder how many
this
other
is,
moms and women out there have been diagnosed with fibromyalgia, had a narcissistic parent, were raised in the organization, and then you suddenly become an ugly version of yourself to your own kids. I can't even tell you how much what you said. I know how hard that was for you to talk about on a channel, but I also know that you are not the only mom who's been through that.
and
Let me
that's
just
why,
give you that.
I reached out to you, because I know what hearing these stories did for me, to know that I wasn't alone. And so if there's just one other mom out there that feels alone and I can show her that you're not alone, then I will feel like every bit of pain, every bit of struggle was 100% worth it.
So now you're
So
in
I,
therapy and now you're learning about reactive abuse and generational trauma. Now you're
yeah,
starting the healing process.
just to learn the fact that when you experience trauma, it writes itself into your DNA, and that DNA becomes genetic,
Mm-hmm.
blew my mind,
Mm-hmm.
opened the universe to
Mm-hmm.
me,
Mm-hmm.
that I don't know that I'll ever be able to forgive my father. It's just, and now I know I don't have to. Knowing that I don't have to is a level of freedom that I can't express. But
Especially
so
coming from JW indoctrination, because if you don't forgive, there's also something wrong with you as well.
absolutely,
Right.
100%, absolutely. So not excusing, not accepting that makes it okay to continue the cycle, but understanding that cycle didn't begin with him, didn't begin with my mom, that went back generations, was huge. And also huge in the fact I never have felt like a strong person, but knowing that I was strong enough to break who knows how many generations, this cycle was the first time I believed in my own strength. So off and on over the last 6 years, I've been in therapy, and I had an amazing therapist, and she moved away literally just before I woke up. And I'm so sad that I never got to tell her,
Oh.
hey,
And
I'm
she
not a
knew you were
witness.
a witness and she didn't make the connection?
I am sure that she did, but she
Oh.
was just really amazing at not pushing me where I wasn't ready to be pushed.
No, that makes sense. You have to come to these conclusions on our own. Like that's the only
Yeah,
way something sticks. Yeah, makes sense.
exactly.
It's
So
so true what you said about trauma holding on to our DNA. There's a book, I don't know if you read it, but it's called The Body Keeps the Score. And
I have
I
it.
was oh my gosh. So I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. Everything you're saying is verbatim everything that I experienced and what got me here today. And let me tell you, I don't even remember my last fibro flare. It was so bad. I felt like My husband would have to come and pick me up out of bed because I could not move, sometimes for days. Isn't
Yeah.
that interesting?
Like actual physical
Hmm.
pain. And
The minute I hear someone diagnosed with fibro, I think, I bet you have unresolved trauma because it does hold on to us for dear life. It really
yeah.
does. It doesn't want to let go of us.
When I think back to how miserable I was
Hmm.
and had no clue what the, like just no clue what the cause was. So like I'm dealing with all of these emotions. I'm dealing with therapy and so while all this is going on in the background, we've moved across the state trying to get away from my dad, putting a little space there. Moved into a congregation with a childhood friend of mine, not one of my two best friends, but another childhood friend of mine, and got really close to he and his new wife and their blended family. And they were really super strong in the congregation, and I coming into this from where we had been doing really terribly spiritually. I mean, had been inactive, had been not going to the meetings, hadn't been out in service. And so we move into this new congregation, and it's like this fresh new start and these new friends that we just clicked with immediately. And I'm dealing with all of this childhood bullshit and trying to enjoy this new chapter of my life and these new friends and this new congregation. And I went back on the pioneer list for the first time in 17 years, and I was just so proud of myself. And then there was a very big falling out between us and this family. I am not somebody that will push the blame. If I did something, I will absolutely admit my part of the blame, take my share of but they treated us really, really badly and stumbled us, for lack of a better word. And it was like I kind of felt like I had been struggling up this mountain for so long, and I finally got to a place where I felt like I was doing good, I was feeling good, we were doing good spiritually, I was doing good emotionally, and then this big giant roadblock gets thrown up in front of us and tripped and fell head over heels. Everybody in the congregation knew about this falling out. They basically knew what had happened. But because you have, family on the pedestal who are all pioneers, and husband's a ministerial servant, and they've just this amazing family, and then you've got us who have struggled for years. They know this with the letters that come in when you move in, and
Hmm. You're the problem family.
yeah. And
Hmm.
so kind of we never really recovered from that. And I think that's where we started getting enough space to start wondering and questioning things. And then COVID hit. And I know it has been terrible for so many people, and I do not take that lightly, but I will be forever grateful.
Oh yeah. No, I hear
Because
that a lot. I hear that a lot. Hmm.
because it gave us that space. I think it gave so many of us that space. And so for the whole first year of COVID, I was slowly having these doubts creep in. Not anything specific, just out of all of the, thousands and thousands of religions, out of all of the thousands of years and all of the millions and billions of people, how is it that I just happened to be born at the right place at the right time in the right organization? How arrogant is it to think that we have all the answers? These questions that people have struggled with for since the dawn of time, and we have all the answers. Like, that's really freaking arrogant. And so I kind of had that playing on my mind. And then my sister, now keep in mind, it's been 25 years since she was disfellowshipped. And in all that time, I've been a good little witness. And no matter how hard it was, I did not have contact with her. I can count on one hand the number of times in that 25 years that I saw or talked to her. At some point over 2020, and I don't remember when it was, I was feeling rebellious, and I sent her a friend request on Instagram, and she accepted it. And I go look at her profile, and in her profile, it said cult survivor. And I noped out of her account so fast.
Oh no.
Like, nope, not gonna do that.
No
Like
doubt.
I never quite understood what apostate meant until I was one.
Right, right. Yeah.
And I remember I felt so awful about it that
Mhm.
I called one of the elders' wives who I was close to and
Wow.
was like, Tracy, I did this thing. I friended my sister, and then I saw that she had cult survivor in there, and now I feel terrible, and I was a terrible person. And so this sister and her husband were really, really good at putting on the loving, kind
Mhm.
front And I didn't realize it was a front until we left. So it was just, well, now you know that that's not the right thing to do. And it's good that that you found this warning sign and you pulled out before something worse could happen. And now we know why Jehovah tries to protect us and why he puts these precautions in place. And, just like rebuilding up all those walls that I had maybe taken a couple bricks out of. The number of times I told on myself over the years.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
That's what we did. And especially coming from narcissistic parents. My mom was just like, always tell the elders of everything, color, consistency. She did it. I did it. And so you tell them enough, they're going to actually have to take action. So that's what happened.
Except, was it like this with your mom? Anything you did, anything that tattled to the elders about everything, except that's a family matter. We don't talk about the screaming. We don't talk about the fighting. We don't talk about that's a
100%.
family matter.
And if we had family studies or shepherding calls, it was based on the family book. Is there a rebel in your house? That was always, it was always a matter of who is the bad kid this week, for sure. Yeah, we didn't talk about how any abuse that was going on in our life, we weren't allowed to. God, there would be hell to pay if we did. Yeah.
Right. But if you lied too much, let's go tattle to the elders. Lying became, and it's something that to this day I struggle with, but it's the only defense I had was to lie, to get myself out of trouble. And
lying
the number
comes
of times,
from fear.
Yeah. And the number of times that I was taken to the elders, even as a little kid, I'm talking 5, 6, 7 years old, to talk about lying. And nobody thought to ask, why is she lying? And so it kind of scared me back. I trying really hard to, refocus, be stronger, where, we can watch the meetings from home. I don't even have to get dressed. We teach, keep the camera off. There's no reason why we shouldn't be at the meetings.
Right. What's my excuse now? Right.
Exactly. But so quickly after, as bad as it scared me and I pulled back from all of these doubts and all of these wonderings, it didn't take long for them to start creeping back in. I sat my husband and my oldest daughter down and I'm like, okay, I'm really struggling here. I don't know if I want to be a witness anymore. Still 100% believing everything, but I don't know if I can do this anymore. And my husband said, okay, well, let's not make any rash decisions. We'll just, kind of float along, but we're not going to make any big decisions now. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But I noticed that we would turn the meetings on if we remembered. And the number of times that we would forget, it'd be like, oh, hey, it's Tuesday at 7:45. The meeting's, half over, and we forgot.
Funny how it gets to that point, right? Like, oh, I totally forgot.
Yeah, exactly. And when we did log in, we're all playing on our phones and nobody's paying attention. And I'm noticing that we were being super critical of the brothers. Brother so-and-so's on, oh my goodness, but the way he and his wife do this or that, or like, what right does he have to be saying these things to us when the whole congregation knows his dirty laundry? And
if you only knew how many people hearing this right now are like, yep, me too. Yep, me too. Me too. For sure.
And so 2020 is slowly ticking by, and these are the things that's going on. And then my big rebellion started. So my oldest daughter, I'm a bookworm. I don't know if you can see, this is just one bookshelf behind me. Like I'm
jealous. Oh my gosh. It's beautiful. Oh, it's like being Belle and Beauty and the Beast. Just I dream for a library one day. Yeah.
And so my oldest daughter is kind of taken after me, and she's a big reader, and she confessed to me that she had snuck and read Harry Potter. And now for years I had wanted to read Harry Potter, but you don't do that. You do no magic, no spirit, like even growing up. And I'm hoping somebody from my dad's congregation sees this and he gets in trouble. I'm just saying. I wasn't allowed to watch Little Mermaid, but for as long as I can remember, we watched rated R movies for violence, rated R for cussing, rated R for sex scenes or nudity. And that was all okay.
That's okay.
But not Disney movies that have a hint of spiritism or magic. And so my daughter, this is like November of last year, my daughter confesses that she'd read Harry Potter. And I'm like, I'm going to read Harry Potter.
How was it?
It was amazing. Right? It was amazing. Loved it. Like totally head over heels. Sad that I was, 15 years late to the ball game because I'm total Potterhead now.
It's so funny because right when we started waking up, that's when we watched the movies. And I feel kind of bad because I just can't get into it now. And I wish I would have done it years ago. But how many people I know that are suddenly like, oh, I woke up, I think I'm gonna watch Harry Potter now.
Well, because it's like, I think especially our generation, because we
Yeah.
were right at the too old
Yep.
edge when Harry
Mm-hmm.
Potter came out, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody was into it. It just, as a witness, you're used to feeling left out, and it was just one more thing to feel left out about.
I know people who refused to watch Harry Potter but had no problem reading and going to see Lord of the Rings. It made absolutely no sense to me. Like,
Right? You know
what's
what
the difference?
never made sense to me was Star Wars. Star
Star
Wars was
Wars.
okay. The
Uh-huh.
Force is okay, but magic isn't
Right.
okay.
But
But
you can't use the Force, but you can use Holy Spirit, though. That's
yes,
okay. That's
yes,
totally
that's
fine.
approved magic.
That's JW magic.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. As silly as it is, like that was my first like leap into freedom. And so that was last
That's not
December.
silly. That is an inner child need that you were actually resolving. Isn't that
It
interesting?
was, it was
Uh-huh.
huge. And so
Mhm.
like December of last year, I read all of them, and that's a lot but I was just immersed. And then about a week later, I had to drive into the middle of the state where the Capitol is for my daughter for a doctor's appointment. And as we were driving home, we were driving through the town where my sister lives, and we drove by the church that I knew that her and her husband were kind of big into, just from family gossip. And it just hit me like a thunderbolt. Just driving by her church, I was like, I'm done. I'm done. I can't do it anymore. Still, 100% believing it was the truth. I just thought my mental health cannot take this anymore. I am going over the edge to a nervous breakdown, to maybe fighting. I've never dealt with suicidal thoughts before, but maybe this is it. Like, it's now or never. I'm losing grip. And so I sent her a message, I think on Facebook is what it was. We weren't friends, but I sent her a message, and it was literally just like, hey, and she answered immediately. I mean, as soon as I hit send, I got a reply back, and she's like, hey. And I said, so I'm having some thoughts about being a witness. And she said, what do you mean? I said, I think I don't want to do it anymore. And she's like, I'm calling. And she called me. She was in the parking lot of, I don't know, grocery store or something. And she's crying and I'm crying. And it's just like no time had passed.
I've been waiting for that phone call.
Yeah. And then come to find out so I have an uncle, my dad's only older brother, who has been an apostate for years. Nobody talked to him just about him. But I guess he and my sister had kind of built a relationship over the years, being the two outcasts. And I guess they'd had just had the conversation within a few days before I called her that wouldn't it be amazing if this pandemic woke some witnesses up? And then I sent her that message and she's like, I never thought it would be my sister.
Right. Sounds like you were as Peemy can get.
I was like, for years, never felt like I was going to be in the paradise. As an adult, there was never a time I thought I was going to make it through Armageddon.
Oh my God. I was just talking to a friend of mine about that yesterday. I couldn't visualize. I think I cognitively knew we were going to be in paradise because that's what we hear ourselves say all the time. But it wasn't something that, like, I would look at the artist rendition and think, that's cool. And I would say at the door, do you know what's missing from this picture? You are. Like, I would, and then I didn't agree. All right. That's what I would say out in service all the time.
I'm
And like,
kind of glad I never did that presentation because I would have used it.
Oh, well, the ebook was the greatest sales book of all time. Are you kidding me?
I'm telling you, I'm the best public speaker in the world.
Yeah,
I'm a great salesman.
You see, it wasn't all bad. This is what I tell people. Someone once told me that the organization really makes really good apostates because like we're fine talking to the public and telling the truth. It's what we do,
Exactly. And man, like Jeremiah was inside me burning and I had to let it out.
Wrestling for a blessing. I can use all of the scriptures. Come on now. I got this.
Now, keep in mind that I am still 100% believing. Knew I had to leave, knew I couldn't take it anymore for my mental health, for my physical health, but still 100%. Like I was just convinced, okay, I know that I'm going to die in Armageddon, but that's okay because I can't take it anymore. I cannot take the pressure. I cannot take the feelings of worthlessness, the feelings of that I'm killing my kids, that whatever. And so somewhere in that first couple of days after I talked to my sister, I homeschooled my kids because that's what you did. And if I have any regret, that's one of the big ones, is that I've homeschooled my kids. And now, we're kind of to the point where it's too late to throw them into the public school system now. So I'm trying to, do what we can do to mitigate the damage.
Why is that one of your regrets, though? I'm curious, because plenty of people, non-religious, do successful homeschooling, and it seems to be a really great
I think
decision for their family.
I think it is. And I think I think maybe even if I was not a witness, I would have still made those decisions, but
Mhm.
how I would have gone about it would have been completely different.
I
We
see.
would have been in co-ops, we would have been in groups,
Mhm.
we would have been, but going back to that insulation, all we had was other witnesses. All we,
I see. So you fell into the category of, and correct me if I'm wrong, that homeschooling was to keep them out of the world, not because I know tons of people who homeschool because just the school system is not really good in
right.
their area, or
Right.
something
No,
like
yeah.
that.
It wasn't about giving them a better education. It was about protecting them from the evils of
Wow.
public school.
It makes sense. That's what we're poisoned to do. And that's one of the parents, that's our biggest decisions as they're up and coming to kindergarten, isn't it? Is
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
what are we going to do? Are we going to homeschool them? Yeah.
And so their educate, and I hate saying this, and admitting it, but them having a good education was never the goal. I would say this: as long as I can teach them to love learning and how to learn, and I still believe that I'm doing good. But if I can teach them to love Jehovah and to be a part of his organization, they'll get everything that they need.
That's what we're taught, though. That's all we knew.
I
We were
know.
taught that, and they've dumbed it down in the last decade or so. But when we would go to
Right.
meetings,
So it
it was
wasn't just
like,
me.
right? No, we would go to meetings and we would actually learn things, like I remember being such an avid note taker, and I was looking for new information. And so what they would say was that you get the best career, like a college degree, like even the
Yeah.
awake
College
articles would
education.
have, right. The awake articles would have some sort of information. So it would
Right.
make sense that we would think this about our kids, because your career is being a Jehovah's Witness. Everything else is a job that supports that career. So of course we're going to pass this down. That's
Exactly.
what we
All
knew.
we have to do is educate them enough that they can get a job to support themselves in the full-time ministry. Like that's
Verbatim. That's every KM throughout the 90s and the 2000s for sure.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And then
Mhm.
but yeah, I have noticed that over the last several years, like reading a Watchtower now it's like kindergarten level.
Oh yeah.
Like it
Yep.
is baby food. I was 7 years old and had to give a talk on the Transfiguration.
Ooh. I was lucky to not have to do that. I think there was a time I was a householder for times, half the times. I forget what it's called.
Yes.
And I remember just like, because that's when we use note cards. We're like, and I had no
Yes.
idea what I saw. It still
Yes.
doesn't make sense to me. There was something wrong with me because I couldn't explain prophecy. I still can't. The doctrine for me. That's why I'm grateful for Lloyd and other activists who are really good at unraveling that. Because I'm just like, you know what? What I don't know won't hurt me, and Jehovah's going to take care of me anyway. That was my mentality all the time.
So that is the one thing I will say is my dad is not a super intelligent person. And I don't say that to be mean or vindictive. He's just, he struggled with undiagnosed dyslexia. He was never given the tools to be a greatly educated person.
Right.
But I've been recently diagnosed with ADHD. And I 100% absolutely, with every fiber of my being, know that I got it from him, that he has ADHD. One of the superpowers of ADHD is when you're interested in something, you can immerse yourself for days without coming up for air and learn everything about it. And so he learned 607 and 1914, the times and half a times and the day for a year, like all of that. And he drilled it into my head. So I can tell you the whole spiel and understand it and know it. And that will come back to play in my waking up story. So going back, so I'd sent my sister this text and I came home that night and told my husband and my daughter, I'm done. That's it. I'm not doing anymore. And only at that point did I find out that separately, they didn't know together, like they hadn't told each other. They had been PMO for a long time. My husband had probably been PMO most of our marriage.
Do you question it at all when your daughter mentioned reading Harry Potter?
It had been a conversation, say like the last third of 2020.
Okay.
about our future and what we were going to do and if we thought it was the truth. And we have a freakishly close relationship.
No,
Like
I get it. I'm
she
like
is
that with
my
mine.
mini
Yeah.
me. We are on the same wavelength. And so I thought that there wasn't much she hadn't told me. And she had gotten baptized. She got baptized at 14, almost like getting ready to turn 15. And I had been so careful never to pressure her into it because I was pressured into it. And I should not have been. I should not have gotten baptized, at least not when I did. And I was never going to do that to her. And so when she said she wanted to get baptized, I thought it was all her. I didn't know that my dad had been pushing and pushing and pushing. And so she later told me that the night that she got baptized, she cried herself to sleep because immediately she knew it was a mistake. And so she'd gotten baptized in 2018. And so from 2018 to now, the end of 2020, she had been chemo. And my husband had been for years, but both of them knew how much I believed it and how much I was struggling. And neither one of them wanted to be the ones to come to me and say they didn't believe it.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And so on one hand, I'm incredibly grateful that I have such an amazing supportive family. But then on the other hand, I think how much time could have been saved if they
What an
had been.
internal struggle, right? Like we want to look out for
Yeah,
mom because she believes this. We're respecting mom's beliefs, but all the while you're not having a breakdown, you're having a breakthrough and you didn't even realize it at the time.
exactly.
So this is
Exactly.
fascinating. Okay.
And this is all happening very rapidly. Like this is 1 foot in, 1 foot out, not knowing what I wanted to do, but still 100% believing it. I'm making plans for leaving. Like I still believe it, but I am not somebody that just sits on my butt. When I've decided something, boy, I'm going for it.
I hear ya. Yes, ma'am. Yes, indeed. Yeah, I get that. Yep. Mhm.
And so I'm on these homeschool groups. That's why I brought the homeschool up. I'm on these Facebook homeschool groups and I posted in one, in the biggest one. And I'm like, okay, so I'm leaving a situation where I'm going to lose my whole community. I'm going to have my husband and my daughters. I don't know how to make friends. Friends have always just, you didn't get a choice. It
No,
was
you were
whoever was
told
in
who
the
your friends
congregation.
are. Right.
Yeah. And if you didn't
Mhm.
like the person, that didn't matter. You
Right.
needed to see them how Jehovah saw them.
That's right.
And if they were jerks, if they were, it doesn't matter. They were your friends. You had to deal with it. But I'd never had to make a friend in my whole life. I didn't know how to make my kids friends. And so I posted in this homeschool group something literally along the lines of like, I'm getting ready to lose my whole community. I have no idea how to make friends. What do I do? Especially this is in the middle of the pandemic. Like, so it's not like I can just join a mom's group or something. And in the comments, somebody had asked why I was losing my community. And I said, well, I was one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm leaving. That means I'm going to be shunned. And she's like, oh my God, my sister-in-law used to be a witness and she went through all this. Let me get you in touch with her. And to the end of my days, I will be grateful for her putting me in touch with who is one of my best friends now, because she has walked me through every step of the way. She's been my
Aw.
rock and I've never met her in person. Like it's all been over the phone.
But some of my best friends I've never met in person. It's
Thank goodness
great.
for the age of the internet is all
I
I'm saying.
know, right? Yes. Our whole
So
community is virtual. Yeah.
So
Mhm.
she was amazing. She said exactly what I needed to hear it, when I needed to hear it in the right order, because had
Mhm.
she pushed me towards like Lloyd's videos right off the bat, it would have been a no-go.
Right.
But the first thing, and I even went back in preparation for this and was reading our first text so that I could remember the order of things. And the first thing she told me was, have you watched Leah Remini's series on Scientology? I was like, yeah, I have. I've always been fascinated by other cults, never ever dreaming that I was in one. But Heaven's Gate
That's
and
what someone in a cult
Jonestown
would say.
right.
Yeah.
and so
Yeah. Yeah.
and so I was like, yeah, I've always been fascinated with Scientology. She's like, well, did you watch the one on witnesses? I was like, no, that was a little like,
Mhm.
I felt kind of crunchy about that. I didn't want
Sure.
to. She's like, go
Right.
watch it. It took me a
Mhm.
couple days to watch it. And it was the first time ever that I heard people saying the things that I had always felt
Yeah.
and
I
tried to
remember that.
bury.
I watched that when I first started waking up too, and I remember being like, "Oh no, what if somebody sees me or watching me
Yes.
through the windows?" Yeah.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. But
Mhm.
I was like, it just like the clouds breaking open and the sun shining. And it was like, this is me.
Because
I wasn't
by the
alone.
sound of it, you were thinking you were alone in the way that you were feeling. We are programmed to think that we're, number one, it's our fault. There's something
Right.
wrong with us, but nobody else talks about the doubts and what it is that you went through. So yes, you're left to think that you're alone. That's why those shows were admonished to not watch them for that reason.
Exactly. Exactly. And so, they take any individuality away from you. Individuality is evil. And so anytime that you feel like an individual, it's a bad thing. There's something wrong with you that you feel like an individual. But I'm watching this and I'm like, oh my God, this is me. This is what I've gone through. This is exactly how I have felt and what I've thought. And I'm not alone. And so then once she'd given me a little bit of time to process that, she's like, okay, now I want you to look into the Australian Royal Commission. I kind of got through I couldn't watch it all. And I couldn't watch it in big chunks. It was just too much. But I watched like most of the opening statements. I watched Jeffrey Jackson's testimony. I watched random bits of the different elders' testimonies, and I was awake. Like, I think it took me 2 or 3 days to get through enough of it that I was awake. And
so up until that point, you were still kind of believing in the doctrine. So the kicker was the governing body actually incriminating themselves.
Exactly. And so, like, yeah, up to that point, I still 100% believed it. Just, it was still like, I wasn't alone. I wasn't the only one having these feelings, but it was still the truth. And then I watched that. And when I watched the sentence that I think that did it, this is it, was when they asked Jeffrey Jackson if they were God's only channel for communication. And Jeffrey Jackson says that would be, what word did he use?
Presumptuous.
That would be presumptuous of me to say. And I would like, that was it. I'm like, that was it.
Yep.
Then what have I been being told for 38 years of my life?
What have we been saying? Like, you're going against a court of law and you are on the governing body and you're saying it's presumptuous to believe this?
And
what?
Yeah, but now if I said that I didn't believe that you were the only channel on earth, I'd be booted out quicker than I could, blink.
Right. But I bet if you said you were questioning whether or not you believe in God, they would have been okay with
fine.
that.
Yeah, we have wiggle room there. But as soon as you question the governing body,
right,
you're out. And so then after I read that or watched that, and then I saw, and by this time I'm joining the subreddit, the ExJw subreddit. I'm joining ExJw Facebook groups. I'm like immersed 100% deep, the ADHD deep diving into this, the ExJw community. And somebody posted that Watchtower article from 2018 that says that the governing body is neither inspired nor infallible. And it just like, how did I not read that? Like, I would hope that if I had read that, it would have woke me up then. But I guess that's what I get for not studying and not being
that's one of I am passionate about that article. Some obscure paragraph, like paragraph 12, where people are not really paying attention. And it was just like one sentence in the middle of the paragraph, which again is a subtle form of giving information and saying, well, it's been there. You just needed to do your study.
We told you, it's not our fault.
We told you, yes.
Yeah. Well, it was around that same time of that article. And this one I did catch, and it really put an awful taste in my mouth for Toni Morris, was that the branch visit when they piped it into all the congregations to be able to watch the branch visit talks and his whole tight pants rant.
Oh yeah.
And he made this one statement. I'm going to mess up the quote, but
fine.
He was talking about, how the world views God, that God is loving and loves all people and, just wants us to be happy and whatever. And he says, I don't know what God you're serving, but that's not my God. And the look in his face, like looking back, it was just like evil. It was hatred and evil. And I thought, I don't like him. And the amount of guilt I had for not liking a governing body member. I mean, but like when we were kids growing up, you didn't like, I knew a couple names. I knew Klein and Jairus, and that was
but
it.
You didn't like know them, right? You thought it was like the heavens opened up and we had literature and subscriptions. You know,
like you could have passed them in the street and not had any clue who it was. I know it's been said so many times, but I'm 100%. If anything is going to be their downfall, it's going to be them coming out into the public.
Them coming out. You know, that article, they're neither inspired nor infallible. One of the things that I immediately thought was, I always struggled with the do not rely on your own understanding, and he who is trusting in his heart is stupid. Those are the two scriptures that were drilled into our heads. And so I thought, okay, do not rely on your own understanding. Okay. The governing body is neither inspired nor infallible, right? So whose understanding are they relying on? And then by extension, whose understanding am I relying on? That means that I can come to my own conclusions.
Well, that's also a narcissistic thing, is rewriting the past and the gaslighting and making you feel like you're crazy for having believed it.
That's a great point. Or if there are women who are anointed and they're going to be priests, why can't a woman carry a microphone?
And why are there no women in any of the pictures of the great, or the 144,000? Or
yes,
why is there nobody but white, blue eyed?
Yeah. And all we do is, we didn't think of this stuff.
No.
Because it was so much busy work. So
much indoctrination constantly. So over the course of like the first 2 weeks of January, I am like drinking all of this in, and all of these things are like, oh my God, how did I never see this? How did I never question this? How did I never know this? That this is the only way we can communicate to Jehovah is through the faithful and discreet slave. And he's saying that that's not true. And so I went back to this friend of mine, and she was like, okay, look up on YouTube Lloyd Evans.
Oh boy.
I probably watched 100 hours of Lloyd Evans videos over the course of the next month. And somewhere in there, well, and I can even actually tell you today, it was January 8th because it was my mom's birthday. And if that was not the most petty move I've ever made in my life, I don't know what is. But on my mom's birthday on January 8th, I sent them a text and said, I know that this is going to be hard to hear. I know that you're going to be upset. I'm sorry for the pain I'm causing you, but I can't be a witness anymore. I'm leaving the organization. I can't handle it. And then I blocked them.
Wow. How did that feel, sending that message?
It was at the same time the hardest thing I've ever done and the easiest thing I've ever done.
The easiest, right? Sounds like our stories are similar. And this is what a lot of guests say, is that yes, you're going to deal with the shunning, but you realize when you wake up to the abuse that you suffered in that organization, that these people needed to be out of your life anyway.
You're not missing anything anyway. Exactly.
Yes.
And if being a witness taught us anything, it's how to cut people out of your life.
Oh my goodness, you're right.
And so I was trained on how to cut people out of my life.
And how to keep people at arm's length anyway. Right.
And so I started feeling guilty, and I unblocked my mom and realized that she'd been trying to call me and text me all day. And but the thing is this is my dad. So over the course of this one day, they had called and or texted every person that they knew that I knew. They were calling everybody and telling them what I had said. And so like at that point, there was no, point of no return. I sent that email or that text, and I couldn't have changed my mind if I'd wanted to. So January 4th is when I called my sister. January 8th is when I sent that text. And in that 4 days, I had completely woken up. Went from being absolutely convinced it was the truth to my entire life had been a lie. And now it's time to start picking up the pieces. And one of the first things I did was I went and got a tattoo, and it's a Harry Potter tattoo.
Oh, I love
it. It was my first, it was one of many of my first steps of rebellion. And I took my daughter, she got her nose pierced, something she'd wanted to do for a long time, and we were free. And so from then on, it was just trying to build things up. But this is the pettiness level of my parents. I was never allowed to be close to any of my grandparents. On the one side, they weren't witnesses. And so that, we couldn't be close. And then on the other side, even though they were witnesses, they weren't strong enough. They weren't good association. So I never had any relationship with my grandparents. And so even though Dad and I have never had a good relationship, I never came between them and my daughters, because I wanted them to have a relationship that I didn't have. And my husband's childhood was way worse than mine. And so his parents were not an option. And so my daughters had they'd always been close to my parents. They had a whole room at my parents' house. It was just their room, all their toys, all their stuff, all their clothes. And within 2 days after I sent that text, they had driven, across the state to drop everything that belonged to my daughters on our porch. Like a
There
dollhouse,
was
my mom.
no, wait a minute, let's talk this out. There was,
It was not even just, I left. It was they're doing away with my, like, okay, my 17-year-old, yeah, she was baptized. She made the decision to leave, but my 10-year-old didn't make any decisions.
it almost seems like it was easy to cut the kids out, which is interesting because this is rare, to be honest. We mostly see, okay, well, can I still see the kids, even though I don't want to see you anymore?
It was a while after, I'm saying a month or two after that had happened. My mom wanted to come over and find out the reasons. I want to know really why you're leaving. I want
Right,
you to be honest and tell me why you're leaving.
right.
I didn't throw everything at her, but she was abused by her father. And so I know that CSA
Mm-hmm.
is something that is very triggering for her.
Sure.
And I thought if anything is going to open her eyes, it's going to be the ARC. And so I said, just do me this one favor of just watching this. And she watched it and she tells me I have to process. That was a lot. By processing, she meant run to an elder and talk to him. And he gives her the company line and she was right back in the fold.
Sure.
So maybe for an hour, she was questioning and then happily went right back into cognitive dissonance. And so during that conversation, she was like, well, can I still talk to Savannah, my youngest? And I was like, I don't care. And my daughter's like, they're not talking to you guys. I don't want to talk to them. If they don't want to talk to my family, then why would I want to talk to them? And I'm like,
Girl, this
good for you.
girl.
Good for you. And so my mom sent me a text and she's like, I've tried to text Savannah and she's not responding. She said she didn't want to, that if you guys weren't talking to us, she didn't want to talk to you and I'm not going to force her. And that was kind of it. And, and I don't begrudge that my parents shunning us. I knew when I sent that text what it was going to result in. Never doubted it. They've shunned my sister for 25 years. I knew I was going to be shunned and
You
I'm
lived
okay
it.
with that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a lot for my kids to take, that all of, just how easily they were erased. And so we were going to try and just fade, but I didn't want to make any big exit announcements. We were going to try and fade, but my dad tracked down an elder from our hall and told him that we were leaving. Elder congregation he'd never been to, elders he didn't know, managed to track one down. And so then the elders were hounding us, texts,
Never just like
emails.
let it be, man. Like
Just,
you
yeah, what
see
is it?
this
Anything
so
off your nose?
often.
You don't need to talk to me, but why do you have to, but it's the narcissism, it's the
Yeah.
control and
Goodness.
abuse and whatever.
Yeah.
And so it was the hardest thing in the world to disassociate ourselves.
Oh, you
because
did. You
we
did.
did.
Okay.
So I sent a text. I'm like, okay, leave us alone. We don't want to be witnesses anymore. I mean, I was nicer than that, but I was like, we don't want to be witnesses anymore. Just, can you please accept that? And he
Right.
sent back, no, it has to be a letter.
Follow the protocol.
And so I sent him an email. I'm thinking an email in letter form.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have to go to the post office and get a stamp. I never mail anything. And he gets the email and he sends back, still has to be a letter. I'm like, fine, I don't even care. Take me off the list or don't.
Right.
I'm a witness or not.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like my father would not let it die. So I can't tell you the number of phone numbers and texts and emails that I blocked, and I was still getting stuff. And so finally, I sat down and wrote out like a 2-sentence letter. We all signed it, and I sent it registered mail or certified mail, and I was done. And we figured out when it was that they were going to announce us, signed on for literally the last 5 minutes of the meeting when they would make the announcements just to hear them announce us, and then signed off. And it was like, that chapter's closed.
I'm curious, what made you want to log in and listen to your own announcement? A lot of people don't do that.
I think just the closure of it.
Makes sense.
Just to, like, it was not the tiniest bit sad. There was not any, like, we were laughing through it. Like,
yeah. Well,
afterwards.
see, there's always this nonstop conversation going on in the ExJw community about whether to disassociate or not. So
I know
some people say it's playing by their rules. There's other people want. I even commented recently in the Reddit group that a lot of people do it for psychological and emotional reasons. What is your opinion on that? To disassociate, or I mean, clearly you did it, but was it more of the closure for you?
For me, it was, honestly, if it had not been for my dad pushing, I would not have cared one way or the other.
I see. Mm-hmm.
but it was a way to stop it. And also, I guess there was a level of closure. There was a level of, I have had to shrink myself into this mold my entire life. I'm done doing that. If I want to celebrate Christmas, I don't want to have to care who knows that I celebrated Christmas. If I celebrate
Yeah.
I don't want to have to care. And so if that means playing by their rules one last time to cut this cord, I'm okay with that. But I 100% believe that that is up for each person, what they need and what's best for them and their family.
Right.
And I am never going to judge one way or the other.
Oh, of course
If
not.
you don't want to play by your rules, by their rules, I get it. 100%. They have no
Because I still haven't. I'm neither DF nor D8.
That's awesome.
I just one day I decided to make a YouTube video. I don't know.
Well, and I feel like if you have family that are going to just play by the rules, that if there's an announcement made, they're going to shun you, but if not, you could still have that relationship. Absolutely. Salvage that relationship. For me, it didn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me.
I was going to be shunned anyway. They were not going to let it lay anyway. So fine, let's just, cut the cord, use all, whatever. Let's put an end to this and start fresh.
But you know what's interesting? In your case, it sounds like putting that disassociation letter and not only close a chapter on the JW life, but it closed a chapter on toxic people in your life too. It's just like I say, Thanos these people right out of our lives.
Such an awakening of its own that that just because somebody's blood doesn't mean they're not toxic, and doesn't mean, because as a witness, you could, just because they were toxic, but he was a witness, he's in good standing in the congregation. I'm not allowed to cut that. I have to still have that opening. I still have to honor my parents. And just knowing that now I can cut that relationship out, I can get rid of that toxicity, even if he's family, was huge. I've not talked to him since January. My grandmother died. His mom died in April. So literally, I think about 3 days after we were announced. And I am in the hospital saying goodbye to my grandmother. I have my aunt, who is a witness, on the phone because she's was not in good enough health to come say goodbye to my grandma. Nobody else has bothered to include her in what's going on in the family. And so, this is necessary family business as far as I'm concerned. So I had called my aunt, put her on speaker so that she could say goodbye to her mother. My dad's in the hotel room, will not look at us, kept his back to us the whole time. Absolutely ridiculous. But I have my aunt on the phone, on speaker, saying goodbye to my grandmother. And while this is happening, he is sending a text to my aunt to tell her that we disassociated ourselves while she is on the phone saying goodbye to my grandmother. And so she gets done talking to my grandma. I hang up the phone. I give my grandma a hug, a kiss, the last hug and kiss I'll give her, walk out the room, and get a text from my aunt that says, "I love you, but I can't talk to you anymore." And that was me being kicked out of my family. That was it. That's how it happened. I have not talked to my dad since January. I've not talked to my mom since April. And I am not lying when I say it has been the most peaceful months of my life, a level of peace I've never, ever experienced in my life.
Raised in such dysfunction, you don't even realize that there is actually peace out there without that in your life. Sometimes we even look for it because it's just so familiar to us. We kind of recreate that dysfunction that we were raised in.
So I think I kind of compare it to this in my head. My husband and I use an app on our phones that's a sound machine at night because I have to have white noise to sleep.
Oh, girl, makes big old-fashioned box fan from Home Depot. That's what I do.
We did that for you until smartphones were a thing. That's what we did. And now we have an app. And it's like in the morning when I get up, that sound has become such a part of your environment that you don't even hear it until I turn it off. And the silence is so loud after having that play. And that's what it was like, is it was such a constant noise in my life that I didn't even realize what an impact it had until it was gone.
Oh, that's such a great analogy. Because it's true.
And the best part of all of it is I have not had a fibro flare since like February. All of my physical symptoms have gone. Like, do I still have pain? Some, yeah, but that's also part of being, getting older. Mm-hmm. But like,
are you an empath too? I wonder if you're an empath.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because as empaths, we First of all, we're bullshit detectors. Secondly, we absorb the energies of other people. And I'm a highly sensitive person. So I would go
Very.
to the conventions or the assemblies or the meetings and I
It's
needed
so
like,
overwhelming.
oh, and then I would put my kids through it. My son is undoubtedly a highly sensitive empath too. And I mean, he was a screaming toddler. And I would do the thing where, like, when you were talking about your daughter at 4, I was the disciplinarian mom, like
Taking them
trying
to
to,
the back room and
yep, yep. Why are you acting like a toddler? I mean, there are so many things I
like, how
regret
dare
as a
you?
mom.
I can't sit still for 2 hours and listen
Right.
to this, but why aren't
Yep.
you?
These are the things that we did. And as an empath, once you get those things out of your life, things do start clearing up. And now you can just kind of focus your energy more holistically, more
Yeah.
internalized. You're also very self aware. So for empaths who, it's kind of like you're a toxic empath, and then you move into being a healed and empowered empath, and two totally different versions of yourself have shown through. So what does life look like for you now? You've
Oh,
got all these toxic people out of your life, and what does the future hold for you guys?
it has been an absolutely amazing year. I won't say everything has been perfect.
Sure.
I am in college now. I am working for the first time in 15 years, and we just celebrated Christmas and it was
Mhm.
a perfect day. This is what I've said. This
Mhm.
year I have had more just perfect days than in my life put together. There's been some really, really terrible days. I'm not going to lie. There have
Sure.
been bad anxiety days. There have been panic attacks. There have been nightmares, but I have had more perfect days than I've ever had before in my life. And that's what I live for.
Interesting. Let me see if you agree with this, right? So you're in the organization, you're a super spiritual person. The worse off you were, the more dirt poor you are, the more miserable, the sickest, the more pain you're in, the more spiritual you are. That means you're doing something right.
So I feel like for the last 10 years of being a witness, I lived in survival mode. That's where
Yes.
they want you.
Mhm.
All that they pour into your head is how terrible the system is, how
Mhm.
terrible the world is, how there's no happy people out there, there's no good people out there. This world is falling apart. It's not gonna, it can't last much longer. And our only hope is the paradise, which I knew I wasn't gonna be a part of. And so what did I have to be happy about? Like my
Mhm.
whole life was just trying to get my kids into the paradise, knowing that I wouldn't be there, but at
Yeah, it's
least
like
my
everything was
kids
a
would be
means
able.
to an end. Everything.
I lived in survival mode, and this year feeling like I'm opening my eyes for the first time and seeing that there is good in the world, that there are good people out there, that there are probably more good people than bad people out there. And there's hope, and we have the power to make change. And that the
Mhm.
things that I accomplish, I'm accomplishing. It's not that Jehovah helped me do it. It's not the Holy Spirit. I've always been a good public speaker. I did great talks, was great on the school. And never once did somebody tell me, you did a great job on your talk tonight, that I was able to just say, thanks. I'm proud of
Thank
myself.
you. Right. Yes.
It was just Holy Spirit. I couldn't do it if it wasn't for Jehovah. Take credit for the hard work that I put in. Take credit for my intelligence. Take credit for my strength has been huge. Finding out who I am, because yeah, being a witness is your whole identity.
And you're
Job
breaking
interview.
that guilt and shame cycle is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
I love that you are going to college because there's a big grieving process that happens when you wake up, where you long for the missed opportunities that you were robbed of. And if you could talk to yourself, talk to that young mom or that young woman in the congregation or that young person who's waking up, what would you say to her right now?
You have so much more strength and ability than you even know. And it is okay to care about your own happiness. It's okay to make your own happiness, to make your own future, to put yourself first, to do something just because you want to do it or just because you need to do it. And you don't have to rely on 8 old men who have never met you to make every decision in your life. You know what's best for you, and it's okay to trust that. Trust your intuition, trust who you are and what you know about yourself. All those years, I know, I'm so sorry. I'm taking so much time.
Don't be sorry. It's fine. It'll probably be a two-part or maybe, I don't know. I mean, this is a gripping story. And I know people
I
in
feel like it's
person.
so boring compared to most
No.
people.
Do you know why people think their stories are boring? Because you're living it. I know so many moms and wives who are going to benefit because after a while, I'm tired of telling my story. And the more you tell it, the more you're reaffirming to yourself. We're doing psychological debriefing. So the more you tell it, the more you're reaffirming it to yourself. And there is another mom in there who is watching under the covers.
The catharsis of this conversation is more than I could ever express.
Oh,
But
oh my God. I just feel like,
so the whole coming back to trusting yourself is, so all of those years that I couldn't concentrate and I thought it was because there was something wrong, I didn't have enough faith, Jehovah didn't want me.
right.
I was diagnosed 2 months ago with ADHD. I had undiagnosed ADHD my entire life. That made it impossible for me to concentrate, that made it impossible for me to focus on something that wasn't important to, like, it wasn't interesting to me. There was nothing wrong with me. There was nothing wrong with me. It had nothing to do with faith. It had nothing to do with Jehovah. There was something different in my brain that we weren't trained to look for or acknowledge. It was just failings. And so that's where I feel like that faith in yourself is something we weren't allowed to have. And I think it's so important to the waking up process to learn to trust yourself, learn to trust when you know something's not right. You can find the answers. You don't have to assume that it's because there's something lacking in you. Have faith that you are a valued, valuable, worthy person. What 8 old men in New York have to say about you has nothing. It doesn't affect your life at all.
And one of the things that I find to be amazing too is I was so focused. You hear people say all the time in that organization, "How are you doing?" "Ah, just waiting for the end of this system of things." That new system
Yes.
philosophy is the best way to do nothing with your life. You just keep saying tomorrow, it's the procrastination cycle of I'm just waiting
Yeah.
for that new system, just waiting for that new system. And so they don't better themselves. They don't
Right.
fix what could be ailing them. They don't take pride in anything. Sometimes they don't even really better themselves financially because that's wrong too. But yet,
Yeah.
if we were to sit and think, and this is in the grand scheme of things, when you think of the world as it spins, if everybody non-JW were to think, I'll worry about it when I get to heaven, nothing would be happening, right? We
Right.
would have no advancements in technology, no advancements in science. We would not. It's amazing to me how the outside world still spins and
Yeah.
Jehovah's Witnesses think the world is focused on them solely. Just
And nobody gives them a second thought. They
nobody,
don't
they're just
care.
not that into you. That's what I want to say to JWs, especially the
Yes,
government. Like they're
nobody
just not
cares.
that into you. Like Samuel Hurd, he's like, there's one of the
Oh
illustrations
my
where
God,
like
that picture of them in the
that
war
picture,
room.
right? And he's got like in the control room and the panic room, and they're like, what are we gonna do about this Samuel Hurd guy? Like, listen, buddy,
Yes, the
it's
scary
not
old
that
man.
into you.
Yes. Oh my God.
On.
Well, that's the thing. Well, and I think it gets to that sunk cost fallacy too. And I think that is a lot of it, like with my mom. You know,
Mhm.
she's coming up on 60 years old. She's devoted the last 40 years of her life to this religion. If she doesn't have this religion, she has nothing.
Right.
She has
Oh
no
yeah.
career, she has no education,
Yeah.
she has nothing. And so leaving leaves her with nothing, you know, and
That
she and
generation, my mom's around the same age. That generation, I weep for them. Although there are plenty of people in their late 60s who are commenting on my videos who say, like, you're never, ever too old. So I admire those people. And if you're in the
yeah,
audience and you are in that age group, please comment and tell us what it's like for you having woken up in your 50s and
please.
60s and the way that you've been able to reconcile that. I think that that's really important too. All
And
ages,
especially, yeah,
actually.
to help those who maybe are that age and who are PMO,
Mm-hmm.
but don't know
Yeah.
how to leave. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think there's
I
that
do
support.
speak to people who are in their late 60s and they're the matriarch or the patriarch of the family and they're grandparents now and they're going to be shunned by everything they
Everybody.
created. Can you imagine that? Oof, yeah, there's a couple of
That's
those.
where
And
I,
if that's you, my heart goes out to you as well, if that describes you. All of us. All of us, you
well,
know.
that's where I never wanted to lose my gratitude or understand how lucky I was that I was able to bring my family with me. And that's what I started to say way back. I said, remember my 2 best friends from childhood.
Mm-hmm.
They're both out. They've been out longer than I have. And they were some of the first people that I reached out to. And
Oh,
they open arms. No questions
Oh.
asked. They were there and ready for me. And that humbled me more than I
You
can.
know, I'm telling you, I think that's what a lot of people do is when they first wake up, myself included, is you start making phone calls. I mean, I shunned so many people, the things that I
Yeah.
participated in, and I just started making phone calls. I'm sorry, I participate,
Yeah.
nothing but goodness coming from those people.
Nothing. And
Yeah.
again, that you seeing the unconditional love on the
Yeah.
outside, they
Yeah.
had us so terrified
Hmm.
of the outside. You know, they should be terrified of the outside because once you realize
Hmm.
what's outside of the doors of the organization, why would you
Hmm.
ever want to go back?
Your story echoes with so many moms and women. I mean, even down to being told we have fibromyalgia. Because when we're diagnosed with something, in my opinion, seeking to be diagnosed with something was giving something blame
Yeah.
for it. Couldn't have been trauma. I'm not a
There
victim.
had to be a
It could,
reason, right?
right.
What do I have
It
to
couldn't have
complain
been I was
about?
abused. It couldn't have been any of that stuff.
Right. Yeah.
And how many witnesses I knew that were all on either alcoholics, closet alcoholics, they're all on antidepressants, which is fine if you need them.
My dad is a raging alcoholic, will never admit it.
Wow.
And
Wow.
all of his friend group, all of them witnesses, most of them elders,
Hmm.
all of them alcoholics. Like you
Of
cannot
course.
in his area, his congregation,
Mhm.
surrounding congregation, you cannot have a get together.
Jennifer, it has been such an honor to have you on the show. I am sure so many moms and wives and women can really relate to so many of the things that you have said. And we're going to put all your contact information in the description box. And we're just really thankful for you to come on. And maybe you could come on again and we can catch up with you. And we'd love to see where you ended up.
That would be amazing. Thank you so much for having me. It was a complete honor. You have been a hero of mine this whole last year since I've left. And so getting
Oh
to
no.
talk to you has been amazing.
Oh no. You need to raise your standards a little bit there, Jennifer.
Not even a little.
It's just been so fun. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I look forward to talking to you again.
Okay, bye-bye. Didn't I tell you she would end up feeling like she's your BFF by the end of the video? I know that's how I feel. Did you see yourself in her story? I'm pretty sure you did. Right? The more we talk about things, the more we realize, oh, you know what? There's more me out there than I really thought that there were. I know when I first started doing this, I didn't know that there were people out there who had the same upbringing that I did. I certainly didn't know that I was not alone in my deconstruction process. But look, here we are, and here you are. And if you want to reach out to Jennifer, all of her contact information is in the description box. And if you want to be on the show, please email me, wendyrenee@gmail.com, or go to wendyrenee.com and click on Be on the Show, and the schedule will pop up and you can get on and come hang out with me. That's all for now. We'll see you next time.